We had a total penalty
Oh
of
my God.
1.6 billion hacks.
So it wasn't just a little bit more. That was double,
Nah,
triple
it
almost.
wasn't. It
Wow.
wasn't. It was pretty huge. And
Wow.
I mean, these are PHEX and EHEX. But if we just look at the distribution, then we had only 118 million PHEX penalties, but we had 1.5 billion hex penalties for EHEX.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. It's a new record. I mean, if somebody followed my February charts, then we already saw that there were already massive amount of penalties already in February. So I tweeted, I think, about that maybe the sell-off was not just through this tweet. There was already, some people were already looking for a reason. And there were already penalties before, almost as high as the other two big events in February. And then, yeah, this March, we just made a new all-time high.
Parabolic. Dude,
Yeah.
that, you know what? That looks like something right before it goes to zero. Everyone's trying to get out, and it's going to go to zero, right? That's the chart for that.
Yeah. But of course, I didn't just look at the penalties. I also started to look a little bit more in detail about the count of how many penalties and how many addresses did do an emergency end stake or a late stake penalty. So I have the data too. I'm just scrolling down, and so the next chart, this blue bar chart, you have late end staking, and somehow the chart doesn't show the exact numbers, but I can hover over it. But what you can, so in March, we had 439 EHEX late stake penalties and 1,495. So the late stake penalties, they did not really increase that much. But yeah, we would think it's the emergency end staking, not the late end staking, right? We can come back to this chart again, but if you go to the emergency end staking by month chart, similarly, the counts of emergency end staking is not really increasing that much compared to other months. So we have 559 EHEX emergency end stakes, and we have 1,292 emergency end stakes on PHEX. So there were even more on PHEX, and I think it was on your channel that we discussed that, which was surprising all since the PulseChain launch, that PHEX continuously have higher emergency end stakes or late stakes. And I think it's because it's more affordable to run the end stake function. And I think people are triggered on both sides. So when a person is triggered about EHEX, maybe that person is also triggered about PHEX too. And
well, I think at first it was, when PulseChain first launched, people were deciding which one to get rid of. Like that was back then. That was a conversation. Like people always sell the thing they got for free. That mental model is like pretty concrete, except when a new coin migrates to a new chain, and we didn't know it was going to be a migration until much later, right? Like even got the clip of me asking Richard on the HEX conference, is this a migration? No, flat out no. And now today on the HEX website, it says something about migration. It's like HEX is migrated to PulseChain, like something to that effect. So you think it was just like letting the market decide that over time? Like, like he didn't know back then, but now it's like, okay, the data's in.
Well, the market always decides, right? And of course, we look at the data to understand the usage and what's happening. And you can see, I mean, the amount of penalties are really high on HEX. But then when you look at the counts of how many people actually, or not people, but how many emergency end stakes and late stakes were made, it doesn't look that many in count. So what does that mean? So I thought, okay, I will need to look at, look a little bit deeper. Where are these penalties coming from? So the first thing that I investigated is like the addresses. How many addresses actually have emergency end staked or late stake? I think I looked at emergency end staked especially. And we can go lower. This is an address count chart for emergency end stakes for HEX and PHEX. And yeah, here the count of addresses again are not that high as previously. So it's only 325 addresses that emergency end staked, and only 449 addresses emergency end staked PHEX. And if you look at the trend, we had at big payday, we had many more addresses basically doing emergency end staking. And then I went even to make even a new chart to look at the share of addresses emergency end staking of the total amount of active stakers. Is that clear what I'm saying now?
Yeah.
And so I'm scrolling down to the next chart, which is this kind of ratio of how many people of the total amount of active stakers did actually emergency and stake. And it's a fantastic chart. It goes down, which means that the share of addresses that emergency end stakes is going down. I mean, it's like when I said in my tweet that March data is shocking, I meant in many ways. So what you can see here,
is this an inverted Ethereum gas chart? Yeah, I'll let you get into it, but the first thing I think of is, is that people having more faith in their product, or is that gas fees going up?
Yeah, it's kind of both, right? Yeah, but you have definitely less addresses from all the active stakers emergency end staking. You can see that at big payday, like in 2020, there were almost 7% of all the active stakers that emergency end staked. And now when we come to March, it's 0.27. I mean, yes, there might be a lot of people for them it does not make sense to emergency end stake, but I'm pretty sure that everybody could find some stake that they made, which they could take out and liquidate. I'm pretty sure that you can. But therefore, you would need to panic to do that. But it seems like that not everybody was panicking. And it's actually just a minority amount of people were panicking. And maybe yeah?
I was just going to ask, did you correlate this with the number of stakes made? Because, for example, I could say, well, maybe there's less emergency end staking because there's just less stakes than there used to be too. Did you look into that?
I was looking into how many new stakes were made. I did not really look into how many stakes were expiring this month. So I wasn't looking into that.
But I guess the point is like looking at these by like you could look at them by numbers or by ratios, right? You could have the ratio of how many people who staked were emerging and staking, or you can look at the number of stakes, and the ratios would be more accurate, right? As far as like telling you the actual what people are doing versus the other one could be skewed by the numbers going up and down, I guess. Does that make sense?
Depends on which ratio. Are you talking about this ratio or a different ratio that I don't have?
Well, I was thinking of, so if you have the number of current number of stakers, right, as of today, and then you have the current number of in-stakes as of today. Those numbers may be or will be, the current number of stakers are going to be much higher than they were a year ago, for example, right?
Yeah,
as far as
we didn't grow that much the last year, but yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could say a year, you could say 2 years, whatever. But the point is the number is going to be way different because the number of stakers at least are growing. So if you had the ratio of the number of people in staking to the number of current stakers.
What do you mean by in staking? Sorry.
In staking, the emergency in staking.
End stake. Okay.
Yeah, in staking, emergency in staking.
Yeah.
If you had that ratio, that would represent the people actually doing it more than the numbers, or it'd be closer because the numbers could be much lower before, and the number of stakes could be much higher now, but people maybe aren't creating as many as they used to, that sort of thing. I'm just thinking, I mean, again, it makes sense.
It makes sense, but it is also significant of how much it drops and does not change, because since February 2020, we are like under 1% of people who emergency and stake from the total amount of active stakers. So I think that's kind of pretty significant, that there are many people who just don't do that. And when I saw that chart, my next thought was, well, if it's not that many people, where are all the penalties coming from? And it must be that there are some big wallets that emergency and staked. So that was my thought. So I'm like, all right, let's just look up.
When I saw
sum up the penalties by address.
When I saw those two charts you showed, I was thinking, okay, there's not a lot of people doing it, so it must just be really big wallets. Maybe a lot of whales are doing it. That's where the penalties are coming from.
And that's what I found. Just before I'm showing you, just to show that PHEX, I did the ratio for the PHEX as well, and even there we have a higher ratio, but it's still very low. We have 0.35% of all the active stakers on PHEX who emergency and staked. So the ratio is actually higher than on HEX.
I need the meme that's like, I can only afford emergency and stake on PulseChain.
Yeah, but it's true.
Sorry, PulseChain, but you made me do this. Yeah.
Wow. But now to the cool stuff, to our whales.
Okay.
A second. I have to switch.
Just want to tie up on the Richard migration thing too. I think it's interesting because before everyone was like, oh, why didn't he just say this beforehand? I actually think it's better. I mean, obviously it sucked going through the period of like the market deciding, right? Almost like that's price discovery. I think there's an analogy there, like HEX discovery, you could say, the market discovering which HEX will dominate. But I'm almost like in hindsight now, I'm kind of like, that is points for decentralization. That is points for not, letting the market decide instead of literally any of the OA, stuff happening. And again, OA could just nuke the price to zero, right? Like they have that much, or they at least suppress it forever, where everyone loses faith. They didn't do that. So
that almost think bad, but
yeah, that would be that could, if there's ever an end to HEX, that yeah. Anyways, but looking back now, I'm like, that's kind of like a point for that makes more sense. Like instead of saying it was migration, when you don't know what the market's going to do, you let the market decide and then you call it. That makes more rational sense. Look, in hindsight now.